I hadn't expected to hear from anyone that day. Not when the grief was still so raw, not when the loss of my husband Tom felt as fresh as it did the moment he passed. The house was quiet, too quiet, as I sat by the window, staring out at the empty street, lost in thoughts I couldn't escape. My mind wandered, circling back to the day I had seen his face for the last time. The funeral, the cards, the flowers, all of it felt like some terrible dream I couldn't wake from. The sudden ringing of the phone startled me. I almost didn't want to pick it up, but something about the sound, the suddenness of it, tugged me out of my numb haze. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Hello, Mrs. Harper? This is James from the pawn shop down on First Street. You don't know me, but I've got something of yours." My heart dropped into my stomach. What could he mean? What of mine could he possibly have? "I'm sorry. Who are you again?" My voice was barely above a whisper, unsure if I was hearing him right. "I'm James. I run the pawn shop. I've got a Rolex here, a pretty expensive one. Looks like it's a gift, maybe? Thought it might be yours." I froze. The words took a moment to register. The Rolex. My husband's Rolex. The one he'd given me for our 10th anniversary. I remember how he'd slipped it onto my wrist, his hand shaking slightly, his eyes full of love. He had said it was a symbol of our love, something that would stay with me forever. "Wait, what do you mean you have it?" I asked, my breath catching in my throat. "Well, someone sold it to me a few days ago," he said, his voice cool and detached, as if he were talking about any other item. "Thought it might be stolen, but the serial number matches what you told me over the phone, so I figured I'd reach out." I didn't know what to say. The Rolex. Sold. My mind raced. It had been my husband's last gift, something I cherished beyond words, something that held his memory. And now, it was in the hands of a pawn shop owner. A wave of nausea hit me. "Who sold it to you?" My voice was barely a whisper now, as if I could barely speak the words I had to ask. There was a brief pause. "Your son, ma'am. Daniel Harper." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any second. Daniel? My son? The one person I trusted more than anyone else? My mind reeled. You're sure?" "Positive," he said, his tone as nonchalant as if he were confirming the weather. "I've got the transaction records right here." I could hardly breathe. My son, the same man I had raised, the one who'd called me every week, the one I'd shared everything with, had sold my late husband's most meaningful gift. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. I wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, but the words got stuck in my throat. "Can you hold on to it?" I finally managed to choke out. "I'll keep it for now. But if you want it back, you'll need to come by and settle it." My mind was racing, but I couldn't focus. "I'll be there soon." I hung up the phone, the sound of it ringing in my ears long after the line went silent. I stared at the receiver, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. My hands were shaking. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I sat down on the couch, pressing my hand to my forehead as the reality of the situation sank in. Daniel. My son. How could he do this? How could he sell the Rolex, knowing what it meant to me? How could he betray my trust like this? Every memory of him, of us, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I had always thought I knew him, trusted him. He was the one I relied on, the one I thought would always be there for me. And now he had sold my husband's Rolex for what? Money? A quick fix to his problems? I didn't know. The world felt colder now. My heart felt like it had been ripped open, and I had no idea how to fix it. There were so many questions, but the most pressing one was, why? Why would he do this to me, to my memory of Tom? I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. My mind was spinning. I had to see for myself. I had to get that watch back, no matter what it took. But first, I needed to understand what had happened. I needed answers. I walked to the door, stopping just before I opened it. I looked at the photo of Tom hanging on the wall, his warm smile still as vivid as ever in my mind. How could he do this? I whispered to the empty room, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. This was just the beginning. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. My son had betrayed me, and now it was up to me to decide how far I would go to set things right. I stood outside the pawn shop, staring at the faded sign above the door. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands were shaking. I had been sitting on the idea of coming here for hours, but now that I was standing in front of it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a nightmare I wasn't ready for. I had to see it for myself, had to touch the watch that Daniel had sold. I stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming as I entered. The place was small, cramped, and smelled faintly of stale coffee and old leather. Shelves were cluttered with all sorts of things: televisions, old jewelry, and countless items that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. But there it was, sitting under a dusty glass case, the Rolex. My husband's Rolex. I couldn't believe it. There it was, staring back at me. The gleaming gold was the same, but it felt different. Seeing it in the pawn shop, under those harsh fluorescent lights, made it look cold, distant, and cheap. My heart sank. I stepped closer, feeling a tightness in my chest. The watch was displayed so casually, like it was just another object waiting to be bought. I could still remember Tom putting it on my wrist all those years ago. How could Daniel, my own son, do this to me? How could he sell the only thing that had connected me to Tom, the one thing I'd held on to for comfort? "Can I help you, ma'am?" The voice broke my thoughts, and I looked up to find the pawn shop owner standing behind the counter, a bored look on his face. He didn't seem surprised to see me. I'm here to look at the Rolex," I said, trying to steady my voice. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I held them back. I had to stay strong. "Ah, the Rolex," he said, walking over to the case and unlocking it. "Nice piece. Came in a few days ago. Thought it was a bit too expensive to be a regular sale, but it's a nice watch." He lifted it carefully, handing it to me with a casual gesture, like it wasn't something that meant the world to me. I reached out and took it from him, my fingers trembling as I held it. The cold metal felt foreign in my hand. The weight of it wasn't right. It felt like a betrayal. "I'm sure it's worth a lot," I said, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. I didn't want to break down in front of this man, a stranger who couldn't possibly understand what this watch meant. The pawn shop owner didn't seem to notice my discomfort. "Yeah, I've got it marked at a decent price. Your son didn't seem to mind selling it. Came in with no problem." My heart stopped. "My son," I repeated, barely able to hear the words over the rushing in my ears. "You mean Daniel Harper?" "That's right. He said it was for his bills or something. Didn't really go into details, but you know, sometimes people get desperate." His words hit me like a slap across the face. Daniel, my son, had sold this watch, this irreplaceable piece of my husband's memory, and hadn't even given me a second thought. My chest tightened, and I felt a wave of anger rising within me. "Can I buy it back?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was like I wasn't in control of what I was saying. I wanted to scream at the man behind the counter, to demand to know why he had allowed this to happen, but I kept it together. "Of course," he said, unfazed. "Just pay the price, and it's yours. That's how this works." I couldn't afford the price. I didn't have that kind of money. But I couldn't leave without it. Not like this. Not after everything Daniel had done. "I'll take it," I said, my voice firm this time, though inside I was crumbling. I was furious at Daniel, at myself, at the world for allowing this to happen. As the pawnshop owner started the paperwork, I stood there, staring at the watch in my hand. I was holding on to something that should have been mine forever, but now, it felt tainted. It was no longer a symbol of love and memories. It was a commodity, something to be bought and sold. The anger, the heartbreak, the sense of betrayal, they were overwhelming. I didn't know who I was angry at anymore. My son had lied to me about everything. He had been acting like everything was fine, like we were still a happy family. But this was a different kind of betrayal. As I left the pawn shop, the weight of the Rolex in my hand felt heavier than ever. I wasn't just holding a watch anymore. I was holding on to the shattered pieces of my family. I walked out into the street, my thoughts swirling. I couldn't understand how my son could have done this to me. How could he sell the one thing that connected me to Tom, the one thing I would never let go of? But as I clutched the watch, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this go. I had to confront Daniel. I had to find out why. This wasn't just about the Rolex anymore. This was about everything he'd lied about. And I was going to find out the truth. I could hardly breathe as I stood outside Daniel's door. My heart was racing, my palms slick with sweat. I hadn't seen him since the phone call from the pawn shop owner. The thought of him, the betrayal in his eyes, was like a storm brewing inside me. I didn't know how I was going to react when I saw him. But I knew I had to confront him. I knocked, my knuckles tapping against the wood more gently than I intended. He opened the door a few seconds later, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Mom, hey. I wasn't expecting you. Come in." I stepped past him without saying anything. He looked at me, confused by my silence, but I wasn't here for pleasantries. I wasn't here to talk about his day or the weather. No, I was here to get the truth, to make him face what he'd done. "Where's the Rolex, Daniel?" I asked, my voice steady, but the anger that had been building in me for hours burned in my chest. "You sold it." "Why?" He looked taken aback for a moment, like the question hadn't even crossed his mind. "What?" "Oh, Mom. I needed the money. You know how things are. Bills have been piling up, and I needed a way out. By selling my husband's watch? I couldn't hold it in anymore." My voice cracked, and the tears that I'd been holding back finally started to spill. "How could you do this, Daniel? How could you sell something that meant so much to me? To us?" His eyes shifted uncomfortably, like he was trying to find an excuse that would make it all okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. The watch wasn't just a thing. It was a memory, a piece of Tom that I'd held on to. And now it was gone, traded for a few dollars to fix his bills. "Mom, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to hurt you. But I didn't know what else to do," he said, his voice low, defensive. But there was no apology in his words. Just justification, excuses. "You didn't know what else to do?" I repeated, my voice rising with every word. "Daniel, you could have asked me for help. You could have told me what was going on. I would have helped. But you didn't. You lied to me. You sold something I can never get back." His face remained blank for a second, then he let out a sigh. "It was just a watch, Mom. It's not like it was some priceless family heirloom. It's not like it was the end of the world." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand just how much this hurt. But I held it in, somehow keeping my composure. "It was the end of the world to me," I whispered, the pain slipping out with the words. "You don't get it, do you? You think this is just about the watch. But it's not. This is about trust. This is about the fact that you, my own son, thought nothing of breaking my heart." Daniel didn't say anything for a moment. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away from mine. I knew he wasn't ready to admit it. He didn't even understand the magnitude of what he'd done. He still didn't get it. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand," he said, his voice low and full of a strange mixture of guilt and pride. "But I needed that money, and I figured if I could just get by for a while, everything would work itself out." I shook my head. This wasn't just about the money. This wasn't about him needing a quick fix. This was about manipulation. It was about him playing me, making me think everything was fine when it wasn't. It was about him seeing me as a means to an end, a way to fix his problems without any thought to the emotional toll it would take on me. "You think I'm just some backup plan? Some safety net for when you screw up?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "Do you really think you can treat me like this, Daniel, and I'll just forgive you?" "I didn't mean to," he started, but I cut him off. "No, you didn't mean to," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. "But here we are. And now you have to deal with it." I took a deep breath, the weight of it all hitting me like a wave. I wasn't just angry at him anymore. I was disappointed, heartbroken. My own son had made me feel like a fool, like I was nothing more than an obstacle in his way. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a long while. I didn't see the loving, respectful son I'd raised. I saw a stranger. A man who had taken advantage of my trust. A man who still didn't fully understand the damage he'd done. "You have two choices, Daniel," I said, my voice cold now, the rage inside me replaced with something colder. "You can either fix this. You can make it right, and I can begin to forgive you. Or you can keep lying to me. Keep betraying me. and I'll walk away. Daniel's face twisted in confusion, frustration. He didn't get it. He didn't understand how deep the wound went. But I couldn't make him see it. Not now. Maybe never. I turned to leave, but I stopped at the door. I won't sit back and let you use me anymore, I said, my voice steady. And you'll regret this. I promise you that. I closed the door behind me, and as I stood there in the hallway, I realized something. The decision had been made. The moment I walked into this house, I knew what I had to do. I was done being used. Done being manipulated. Daniel had crossed a line, and now it was up to me to find my own way. I couldn't shake the image of Daniel's face from my mind. The way he stood there, unapologetic, defensive, like everything he'd done was justifiable. Every word he said felt like a slap to the face, but it wasn't just the watch. It was everything. His lies, his manipulation, his complete disregard for the family he was supposed to care about. I knew he had to face the consequences, but what good would just a confrontation do? He wouldn't learn anything from me demanding an apology. No, this needed to be bigger. I needed to make him understand the weight of his actions. I spent the next few days in a haze, going over everything in my head. There were so many moments I'd overlooked, so many times I had believed his excuses without ever questioning them. I had been so naive. But now it was time to see things for what they really were. I started small. I made a list of everything I knew. The things Daniel had said, the lies he'd told me about his finances, the way he'd always acted like everything was fine. I started calling in old favors from people I knew. Friends, acquaintances, anyone who might have seen or heard something. One by one, the pieces began to fall into place. It wasn't just the Rolex. It was bigger than that. His debts, the shady dealings, the lies he'd spun to make everyone believe he had everything together. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. Each time I uncovered something new, I felt a sense of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the growing realization that Daniel had been playing me for years. I'd trusted him completely. I had always believed he was the good son, the one who would do the right thing, the one who had his life together. But that was just the story he'd told me. The story he wanted me to believe. I started documenting everything. Phone records, bank statements, anything that would prove the extent of his deception. I wasn't just trying to expose him to make myself feel better. This was about justice. He needed to see how far he'd gone, how much he'd taken from me without a second thought. This wasn't just about a watch anymore. This was about trust. This was about respect. As the days passed, I felt the weight of what I was doing. I wasn't just his mother anymore. I was someone who had been wronged, and I was determined to make him realize that. The more I uncovered, the more I saw the lengths he had gone to keep up his perfect image. It was all a facade. A carefully constructed lie that had fooled everyone, including me. I started thinking about how to tear down that facade. How to make him face the truth. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not this time. He thought he could sell a piece of my heart and walk away scot-free? He was wrong. But the more I dug, the more I realized how deep his web of lies had gone. He had people helping him, covering up for him, making sure no one ever saw what was really happening. I couldn't take it down by myself. I needed more than just a confrontation. I needed to expose him to the world, to everyone who had ever believed in the image he'd carefully crafted. I wasn't just going to get my Rolex back. I was going to make sure he paid for everything. By the time I gathered all the evidence, I was ready. I had everything I needed. Now, it was time to show Daniel who he was really dealing with. He had underestimated me, thought he could get away with it. But he hadn't realized that the cold, heartless woman he'd created by his betrayal wasn't someone who could be easily ignored. I stood in front of the mirror that night, staring at my reflection. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. The grief-stricken mother had been replaced by someone far stronger, far colder. And I was ready to make Daniel understand that actions have consequences. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was seeking justice. For me. For Tom. And for everything Daniel had taken from me. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Daniel had built an entire world of lies, a web so intricate that even I couldn't see through it at first. But now, with every piece of evidence I gathered, it all started to unravel. The Rolex was just the tip of the iceberg. As I dug deeper, I saw the bigger picture. A picture where I was nothing more than a pawn in his game. Every excuse he'd given, every sob story, every promise he'd made to me. All of it was a manipulation. It wasn't just about the Rolex anymore. I found receipts, bank statements, and emails that proved how much he'd been hiding. He had been lying about his finances for months. No, for years. The debts, the shady deals, the lies about his business opportunities that he'd used to cover his tracks. I had been so blinded by my love for him, by my trust in him, that I had never once questioned the stories he told me. But now, as I stared at the pile of evidence in front of me, I realized how much of my life had been built on falsehoods. How much of my trust in him had been manipulated. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was devastated. He had made me feel like a fool, like I had failed as a mother, as a person. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not this time. I started making plans. Every lie he had told me was going to be exposed. I wasn't going to confront him head-on again. No, that would be too easy for him. I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions, to see the destruction he'd caused. He needed to know what it felt like to lose everything. I began contacting people. Business partners, old friends, anyone who might have information that could expose him. One by one, they confirmed what I already knew. Daniel had been living a lie, and now it was all coming crashing down. The more I spoke to people, the more I realized how many people he had deceived, how many had blindly supported him because of the image he had so carefully crafted. But that image? It was nothing more than a mask. A mask that was starting to crack. The tipping point came when I confronted one of his business partners. I had learned that he was the one Daniel had been hiding behind, using him to shield his lies from the world. When I showed him the evidence, his face went pale. He didn't deny it. In fact, he admitted everything. Daniel had been sinking deeper into debt, gambling away his money, and using every trick in the book to avoid the truth catching up with him. With that confession, I knew it was time. It was time for the world to know the truth. I wasn't afraid of Daniel anymore. I had already lost him when he betrayed me, and now, it was time for him to face the consequences. I called the people who needed to know, and I made sure the truth reached every corner of his life. I didn't care about the fallout. I didn't care about his anger, his shame, his regret. It was too late for apologies. When Daniel found out what I had done, he was livid. He called me, his voice trembling with rage, demanding to know why I had exposed him. His world was falling apart, and there was no way he could stop it. For the first time, I saw the man beneath the facade. He wasn't the confident, self-assured son I had known. He was a scared little boy, a man who had been playing a dangerous game and had finally been caught. But the more he raged, the more I realized something. His anger wasn't at himself, it was at me. He wasn't sorry. He was just angry that his lies had been exposed. He didn't care about the pain he had caused me. He didn't care about the betrayal. He cared about one thing: his reputation. And that, more than anything, made me realize just how far gone he was. As I hung up the phone that night, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had exposed him. The man I had once loved, the son I had raised, was no longer someone I recognized. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't devastated. I was free. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I wasn't going to be the victim of his manipulation anymore. He had lost everything, and it was his own doing. The road to revenge had been long, but it had led to a place of closure. And now, I was finally ready to move on.
The first cracks in Daniel's perfect life appeared within days. I didn't have to do anything. Fate was already at work, dealing with him in ways I never could have planned. The moment I exposed his lies, I knew it would unravel, but I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. I wasn't sure how I felt watching it happen. Part of me felt vindicated, like I was finally getting what I deserved, but there was still this emptiness, this gnawing pain deep inside. I wasn't sure if I could ever feel whole again, even as I watched his world crumble. It started with his wife, Emma. I could see it in her eyes when they visited me a week after the fallout. She was different, quiet. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced with a coldness that stung more than I expected. They had always been the perfect couple, always posting photos on social media about how blessed they were, how happy their life was. But now, I could see the cracks forming in her trust. She wasn't looking at him the way she used to. The spark in her eyes had faded, and in its place was something harder, doubt. "Daniel, what's going on?" Emma asked one evening as I sat on the porch, sipping my tea. Her voice was soft, but I could hear the tremor in it. She wasn't just asking about the Rolex. She was asking about everything, the lies, the debt, the constant excuses. I could see her struggling with the realization that her husband, the man she had trusted so completely, was not who he had appeared to be. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside her, his gaze falling to the ground. I could tell he wanted to deny it, to pretend nothing had changed, but the truth was out now, and it was too late to cover it up. He wasn't as smooth as he thought he was. I didn't think it would go this far," he mumbled, his voice strained. "I didn't mean for things to get out of hand." His words were empty. I'd heard them before, many times, when he was trying to escape the consequences of his actions. But Emma wasn't buying it anymore. She had begun to see the real Daniel. I watched as she turned to him, her face hardening. "You didn't think it would go this far," she echoed, her voice rising now. "You thought you could just lie, cheat, and hide everything from me? From all of us? Do you really think I'm that stupid, Daniel?" His eyes flashed with panic, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his confident facade. But he didn't apologize. Not truly. He didn't understand what was happening. He was too proud to admit that everything was falling apart because of his own selfish choices. "You don't get it, do you?" Emma's voice cracked, and her hands balled into fists. "I trusted you, and now I don't know who you are anymore. How could you do this to me? To us?" I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was all over Daniel's face, the way his shoulders slumped under the weight of her accusations. He didn't even try to explain himself. He knew he couldn't. The next few days were filled with whispered conversations, tense dinners, and an atmosphere thick with unresolved anger. Daniel's friends started pulling away. The business deals he had so carefully crafted fell through, one by one. People who had once admired him began to question his integrity. It was like watching someone's life implode, and I wasn't sure if I should feel sorry for him or if I should feel like I was finally witnessing justice. His pride kept him from admitting fault. He continued to act like he was the victim, like I had somehow forced him into this position, but the truth was undeniable. The perfect image he had so carefully cultivated was shattered, and now he was left to pick up the pieces. I knew that he had to face the consequences of his actions, but seeing him struggle with it didn't make me feel any better. It didn't erase the pain, the betrayal, the years of lies. I had gained closure in some ways, but there was still a part of me that felt empty, like the weight of the past could never be fully lifted. One evening, I received a text from him. It was brief, just a few words, "I'm sorry." That was all. No explanation, no admission of guilt. Just those two words that meant nothing coming from someone who hadn't truly understood the depth of his actions. It was too little, too late. I didn't respond. What was the point? He could apologize all he wanted, but I had already learned the hard way that words meant nothing. Actions were what mattered, and his actions had spoken volumes. Watching Daniel's perfect life fall apart was bittersweet. Part of me wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd done, to experience the same heartbreak he had caused me. But another part of me couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He was a man who had built his world on lies, and now that world was coming down around him. But I wasn't going to waste my time feeling sorry for him. I had already lost him. And as I watched him struggle, I realized that the person who had betrayed me was no longer someone I recognized.
The day had come. The moment I'd been dreading and preparing for. I had spent weeks gathering everything. Every lie, every secret, every betrayal Daniel had buried beneath layers of charm and deception. I had the truth, all neatly packaged and ready. I had given him chances, hoping he would realize the weight of his actions before it got to this point. But it was clear now. There would be no more excuses. I couldn't let him get away with it anymore. I dialed his number, my hands trembling slightly as I pressed the phone to my ear. The anticipation had been building for days, and now, as the phone rang, my heart raced. It felt strange, knowing this call would be the end of it. The end of everything I thought I knew about him. The end of the years of trust, of belief, of motherly love that had blinded me to the man he had become. "Hello." His voice cracked slightly, like he already knew something was wrong. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady but cold. We need to talk. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation. He knew. He must have known this day was coming, but he wasn't prepared for it. He had never expected me to turn the tables on him, to be the one who would make him confront the truth. Mom, I don't think this is a good time, he said, his words rushed, his discomfort palpable. No. Daniel. It's time. I cut him off, the anger I had tried so hard to hold back slipping through. I've been patient. I've tried to understand, to give you chances to fix this, but now it's over. You don't get to hide anymore. I could hear him shift on the other end, the sound of him trying to control his breathing, to maintain his usual calm demeanor. But it wasn't working. Not this time. You're right. I've been hiding, he admitted quietly, the words thick with regret. But I didn't know what else to do. I was drowning, Mom. I didn't want to lose everything. You already did, I said, my voice trembling, though I wouldn't let him see it. You sold my husband's watch. You lied to me. You've been using me, Daniel. All these years, you've used me. And now I have nothing left but the truth. There was a long pause, a silence that stretched between us. I could hear his shallow breaths, the struggle inside him to keep his composure. But it wasn't enough anymore. Nothing could save him now. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Daniel finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you. Then why did you? I demanded, my voice cracking with emotion. Why did you hurt me? Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I thought I could fix it on my own. I thought if I could keep everything together, you wouldn't see what I was doing. But I messed up, Mom. I messed up badly. His apology sounded hollow. It was just words, words I had heard before. Words that had no real weight, no real meaning because he didn't fully understand the damage he had caused. His guilt was there, but it was too little, too late. He didn't know what it meant to truly feel sorry for his actions. He only regretted being caught. Fix it? You can't fix this, Daniel, I said, my voice barely audible now. You've taken everything from me, and now all that's left is the fallout. The lies, the secrets. You thought you could control it all. You thought you could get away with it, but the truth has caught up with you. I heard him sigh deeply, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was talking to the man I had raised, not the stranger who had betrayed me. The walls he'd so carefully built around himself seemed to be cracking, but it wasn't enough. He wasn't sorry for me. He was sorry for himself. I never wanted to hurt you, he repeated, his voice breaking. But I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I could hear the genuine sorrow in his voice, but it didn't make a difference. The damage was done. I took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. You've already lost everything, Daniel. Not because of me. Not because of the watch. But because of the choices you made. You've lost me. And now you'll have to live with that. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. He wasn't going to win. He wasn't going to manipulate me anymore. I'm done, Daniel, I said softly but firmly. I'm done being the one who keeps holding on to a relationship that you never valued. I don't know what to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything anymore, I replied, my voice calm, but the pain still evident. It's over. I hung up the phone, the finality of it all settling over me. I didn't feel relief, not yet. The wound was still too fresh. But I felt something else. Strength. Control. I wasn't the victim anymore. I had taken back my power. Daniel's world was falling apart, but my world had already shifted. I had already made the hardest decision I'd ever have to make. And now, there was no turning back. The days after the confrontation passed slowly, each one carrying with it a weight I couldn't shake. I spent so much time replaying everything in my mind, the betrayal, the lies, the hurt, but eventually I had to let it go. It wasn't just about the Rolex anymore. It was about everything that came after it. The realization that Daniel wasn't the son I thought he was. And that I wasn't the mother I thought I could be. We had both changed in ways I never expected. But in the end, change was inevitable. I remember sitting in the quiet of my living room one evening, the empty space around me feeling strangely comforting. The house, once full of the noise of family, now seemed peaceful, almost serene. The phone didn't ring anymore with excuses. The letters stopped coming. And the visits? They had become fewer and fewer. Daniel had stopped trying to reach out, and I knew that our relationship, what little we had left, was over. The pain didn't just disappear, though. It lingered in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder of what I had lost. I had tried to picture a future with Daniel in it, but now, all I could see was a stranger. His face had changed. His voice had lost its warmth. Everything about him felt distant. And I couldn't hold on to that anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that things could go back to the way they were. But as I sat there, looking out the window, I realized something. I didn't need to keep holding on to the past. I had spent so much of my life trying to fix things, trying to make everyone happy. But now I was done. I had done what I needed to do. I had exposed the truth, not just for me, but for him. For Daniel. He had to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how much it hurt. And I had to let him go. The relief didn't come instantly. It wasn't like flipping a switch. But slowly, I began to understand that peace wasn't something I had to fight for anymore. It was something I had to allow myself to feel. I had given Daniel every chance to change, to be the person I thought he was. But in the end, it wasn't up to me anymore. I couldn't fix him. I couldn't force him to take responsibility for what he had done. The Rolex, the symbol of his betrayal, started to fade in my mind. It became just another memory. A painful one, yes, but a part of my story now. I didn't need it to define me. I didn't need it to keep me anchored to the past. The watch had once been a reminder of love, of connection, of the man who had meant the world to me. But that man was gone. And I had to let go of that version of him. I found myself going through my day-to-day life more freely now. The anger was gone. The bitterness had faded. I was no longer trapped in the constant loop of trying to make sense of everything. I had faced the truth, and now I could move forward. There were still moments of sadness, of course. Times when I would catch myself thinking of Daniel, of what he could have been, of what he should have been. But I didn't let it consume me. I didn't let it pull me back into the past. I had learned that the only way to truly heal was to accept what had happened and then move on. I found comfort in small things now. A walk in the park, the sun on my face, the sound of birds singing in the morning. I started volunteering at the local shelter, meeting new people, and feeling a sense of purpose again. I rediscovered the joy I thought I had lost when Daniel betrayed me. And in that joy I found peace. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't need anyone else to define my worth. Not Daniel. Not anyone. I had value simply because I existed. And I had learned that the hard way. As the weeks passed, I stopped waiting for an apology from Daniel. I stopped waiting for him to come to me and admit his wrongs. I stopped looking for closure from him, because I had already found it within myself. I thought back to the night we had our final conversation, how I had felt a sense of finality in my words, like I was closing a chapter that needed to be closed. I was no longer holding on to the past. I was walking forward, one step at a time, knowing that I had done everything I could, and it was enough. Daniel had lost everything. But in a way so had I. The difference was, I had learned to live with it. I had found strength in myself, in the quiet, in the peace I had worked so hard to reclaim. And that peace, it was more valuable than anything Daniel or anyone else could have taken from me.
I stood by the window, looking out over the garden. The flowers were blooming again, the trees standing tall against the bright blue sky. There was something so peaceful about the stillness of it all, a reminder of how far I had come. It wasn't just the legal victory that filled me with a sense of completion. It was the journey, the struggle, the pain. It had all led to this moment, and now, for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The court battle had ended months ago, but the weight of it still lingered in my mind. I had won, of course. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the restitution I deserved, and for a brief moment, I thought that would be enough. But when I received the money, the Rolex was no longer important. The betrayal wasn't something I could buy back. The real victory had come from the strength I'd found within myself to face everything head on and not let it break me. I didn't need the money. I didn't need to get even. The legal victory wasn't about reclaiming the watch or punishing Daniel. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of standing up, not just for what was mine, but for who I was. The past didn't have a hold on me anymore. I was no longer defined by the betrayal or the hurt. I thought about Daniel and Emma. The life they had built, the perfect image they had shown to the world, was in ruins now. I had seen it happen slowly, piece by piece, as their friends pulled away, as the business deals they'd worked so hard for fell apart, as the truth about Daniel's manipulation reached everyone who had ever trusted him. For a moment, I wondered how they were doing, but it was a fleeting thought. They were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, while I had already moved on. My life was mine again. I didn't owe them anything. I didn't owe Daniel any more of my time, my thoughts, or my emotions. I thought back to the final conversation we had, how I had felt a sense of finality when I hung up the phone. His words of regret had meant nothing to me, not anymore. The damage was done. He had lost his family, his reputation, and worst of all, he had lost my trust. The last thing I heard from Daniel was a call asking for forgiveness. His voice was strained, apologetic, as if he thought saying the right words could undo everything. But it was too late. I had already moved on. I wasn't the same person who had raised him anymore. I had let go of the hope that he would one day change. That was the hardest part of it all. The realization that sometimes people don't change. Sometimes they just keep making the same mistakes. And you have to decide whether you'll keep letting them hurt you or whether you'll walk away. I didn't answer his call. I didn't need to. I had found my peace without him. My journey had been long, painful, and full of twists I never saw coming. But I had come out stronger. And that was all that mattered. I was no longer defined by the past, by the man who had betrayed me. I had reclaimed my sense of self, my independence, and that was worth more than anything else. As I stood in the garden, breathing in the fresh air, I realized something. The pain of the betrayal would never fully go away. It would always be a part of me, but it no longer had control over me. It was a chapter of my life I had closed, a painful memory I had learned to live with. Daniel had his chance. He had his time to make things right, and he chose not to. Now he would have to live with the consequences of his actions. I would never forget what he had done to me, but I had forgiven myself for allowing it to happen. And that was enough. Justice had been served, not just in the courtroom, but in my heart. I didn't need him to apologize, to make things right, or to change. I had already moved on. I walked into the house, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders with every step. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it. I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, one where I would no longer be looking back, no longer be waiting for someone else to fix what was broken. I was whole again, and that was all I needed.